له يا سيد أنا رجعت على لبنان، أتمنى أنك ترجع كمان على لبنان.
قرار صادر من مجلس الجامعة تسمية حزب الله الإرهابي.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufa. These are today's top stories. The waste management plan begins with the first waste trucks entering the Nami landfill that has been closed now for over 8 months. Prime Minister Salam justifies Arab countries' concerns about a possible Iranian advancement in the region, describing attempts to challenge it as illegal. And 4 people killed in a suicide bombing in Turkey's capital of Istanbul, with 36 people wounded. The waste management plan that was approved last week has begun, with the first waste trucks entering the Nami landfill that has been closed for over 8 months now. 7 dump trucks entered Nami and will receive only the trash that has been accumulated on the streets of Beirut and Mount Lebanon, according to the cabinet's plan. Last week, the cabinet decided to establish 2 landfills as well in Costa Brava and Bush Hamoud, which are reopening today, and to reactivate the Nami landfill for 2 months as part of a 4-year plan to resolve the country's waste problem, despite the rejection of many residents and civil society activists. Preparation works kicked off on Friday at the Costa Brava seaside site in Khalde, where the government has decided to set up a garbage landfill as part of the plan to resolve the country's waste crisis. Lebanon's unprecedented management crisis erupted in July 2015 after the closure of Nami, which was receiving the waste of all of Beirut and Mount Lebanon. Prime Minister Salam is justifying the Arab country's concerns about a possible Iranian advancement in the region, saying its attempts to challenge it are illegal. He was quoted as saying Iran is expanding vastly in the Arab world while Arabs are not intervening in its affairs. The complaints are legal and based on distrust. Salam said this in an interview with a Saudi-owned daily Al-Sharq Al-Awsat newspaper. And he also added that his government is relentlessly seeking to rectify Lebanon's gap with Arab countries, particularly Gulf states, by affirming Lebanon's keenness to preserve Arab consensus and unity. The intensifying battle for influence between the region's main Sunni and Shia powers has sparked growing concern, which is witnessing measures being taken against suspected Hezbollah-linked individuals and companies in Gulf countries. 4 people were killed in a suicide bombing in Turkey's capital of Istanbul, bringing the number of people killed in the attack to 5, including the suicide bomber. Istanbul's governor said a detailed investigation was underway. The bombing wounded 36 people, 7 of them in a serious condition. Turkey's health minister said that 12 of those wounded were foreigners. The explosion hit this morning Istiklal Street, a wide boulevard closed to traffic that is lined with international stores and shopping centers, just a few hundred meters from an area where police buses are usually parked. Armed police sealed off the main shopping street where half a dozen ambulances had gathered. Forensic teams in white suits were scouring the area for evidence as we speak. A Fly Dubai passenger jet crashed in southern Russia earlier this morning, killing all 62 people on board as it tried to land in bad weather in the city of Rostov-on-Don. The Boeing 737 heading from Dubai to the southern Russian city was reportedly making its second attempt to land when it missed the runway, erupting in a huge fireball as it crashed, leaving debris scattered across a wide area. Russia's investigative committee confirmed that all 55 passengers and 7 crew members on board were killed and launched a probe into whether technical problems, pilot error, or poor weather were behind the crash. A no-frills budget carrier, which is a sister firm to Emirates Airlines, Fly Dubai is government-owned and was set up in March 2008. The passengers on board flight FZ981 included 44 Russian nationals, 8 Ukrainians, 2 Indians, and 1 Uzbek. Residents in the crowded Brussels borough of Molenbeek expressed relief and disbelief after the arrest of Europe's most wanted man, Paris attack suspect Salah Abdeslam, in their neighborhood. Abdeslam arrest after a 4-month manhunt after the November 13 Islamic State attack on the French capital raised new questions about how he eluded capture for so long, apparently in Brussels. Abdeslam, a 26-year-old French citizen, was raised by Moroccan-born parents in the multicultural melting pot of Molenbeek. Now police, who moved in swiftly to seize him at a house on the Rue de Quatre-Vents, also known as Four Wind Streets, are questioning a man and 2 women found at the address. suspected of being part of the family harboring the fugitive. Dozens of people were killed or wounded in a series of airstrikes on the city of Raqqa in northern Syria, according to the Britain-based activist group, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. It said the dead included women and children and more than 60 people. It did not specify whether Syrian or Russian forces had conducted the airstrikes. That a cessation of hostilities in Syria took effect 3 weeks ago, reducing violence but not halting the fighting, as peace talks did take place in Geneva. The deal does not include al-Qaeda or ISIS militants, whose de facto capital in Syria is Raqqa. UN envoy Ismail Oud Sheikh Ahmed arrived in Yemen's rebel-held capital to try to restart peace talks between Iran-backed insurgents and the internationally recognized government. The Mauritanian diplomat met a foreign affairs representative of the Houthi rebels a day after the UN envoy held talks in Riyadh with Yemeni President Abdurrabu Mansour Hadi. Yemen has been gripped by violence since September 2014, when the Iran-backed Houthi rebels, who had long complained of marginalization, stormed Sana'a and forced the internationally recognized government to flee the south. A Saudi-led coalition began bombing raids on Houthi positions across Yemen in March 2015, but the insurgents still control parts of the country, including the capital. Hadi's government has declared the southern city of Aden to be the country's provisional capital. And the UN said on Friday that the Saudi-led raids are responsible for the vast majority of the estimated over 3,000 civilian deaths in the Yemeni war. Coming up next, protesters clash with police in Salt Lake City outside a campaign rally being held by Donald Trump. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the 1620 o'clock news here on Future Television. Protesters clashed with police in Salt Lake City, Utah, outside a campaign rally being held by U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. The Republican frontrunner has drawn criticism for incendiary rhetoric and reject policies such as his vow to deport 11 million illegal immigrants, temporarily ban Muslims from the United States, and build a wall along the Mexican border. Recent outbreaks of violence during protests at Trump rallies have prompted President Obama, a Democrat, and mainstream Republican figures to speak out against the billionaire. Trump said that he believed there would not be a convention fight for the Republican presidential candidacy, and he earlier warned of riots if he is denied the party's presidential nomination after he scored big wins in primaries Florida, Illinois, North Carolina.
It was incredible. We pick up a lot of delegates. We're moving. And I think, you know, they talk about the convention. I think we get to the convention, it's over. I don't think there is going to be much of a dispute. I don't think we're going to have a lot of dispute. Do you notice that Hillary's only focused on me? Only. They talk about Trump, Trump, Trump. And the last person she wants to be running against is Trump and us. Believe me. So he was born in Canada, lived there for 4 years. He was a citizen of Canada 15 or 16 months ago. He was a citizen of Canada. Can you believe it? He became a United States Senator. And then he said, I didn't know I was a citizen of Canada. Lying Ted, lying Ted. He didn't know. He was a joint. He was U.S. and he was Canada. And, you know, that's not the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to be born like here, here, here. And they're always comparing me like with Hillary, the Wall Street Journal, which has no idea anything about math. They had a thing. Well, Hillary had X millions of votes and you had a little bit less. I had 17 people in my deal. She had Bernie, just Bernie, who looks like he's finished now. You know, I'd love to run against Bernie, but honestly, I'd rather run against Hillary. I must be honest. This is a very friendly group here. I expected a couple of protesters. I mean, I'm sure a couple of did any protesters sneak in tonight? Anybody? Huh? So that's so nice. You know, I was seeing and coming in, I was seeing that there were some protesters outside. They don't show the 2,000 people that are trying to get in that are with us. They show other people. And how they get here is pretty sad, but you're going to have to check on it because they always talk about we're stifling them. They're stifling us, folks. They're stifling us. We want nobody to get hurt. We want everything to be perfect, and this seems to be like a perfect evening, but they can't stifle us. They can't let it happen. We can't allow it to happen.
U.S. President Barack Obama once again urged Senate Republicans to consider his nominee for the Supreme Court, saying not to would be an abdication of the Senate's constitutional duty. On Wednesday, Obama nominated Merrick Garland, a centrist appeals court judge and former prosecutor, to the highest court in the United States. The White House and its allies seek to turn up the heat on Republicans to reverse course and act on President Barack Obama's Supreme Court nominee as the Senate begins a two-week recess on Friday. Conservative activists, however, vow to fight in support of Republican leaders who insist that the next president to be elected on November 8 and take office in January make the appointment, hoping their party's candidate wins.
Hi, everybody. One of the most consequential responsibilities our Constitution grants a president is appointing a Supreme Court justice. The men and women who sit on the Supreme Court safeguard our rights. They ensure that ours is a system of laws, not of men. And they're given the essential task of applying the principles written into our founding documents to the most challenging questions of today. So this is a duty I take very seriously. It requires me to set aside short-term politics in order to maintain faith with our founders. And on Wednesday, after weeks of consultations with Republicans, Democrats, and leaders across the country, I selected a nominee whose unmatched experience and integrity have earned him the respect and admiration of both parties. Chief Judge Merrick Garland. Judge Garland grew up in my hometown of Chicago with parents who taught him to work hard and deal fairly. As a young lawyer, he left a lucrative private firm to work for half as much in public service. Eventually, he oversaw the federal response to the Oklahoma City bombing, working side by side with first responders, victims, and their families to bring justice for an unspeakable crime. And everywhere he went during that investigation, he carried with him in his briefcase the program from the memorial service with each of the victims' names inside. For the last 19 years, Judge Garland has served on what's known as the second highest court in the land, the D.C. Circuit Court, including the last 3 years as Chief Judge. On the bench, he's shown a dedication to protecting our basic rights, a conviction that powerful voices must not be allowed to drown out those of everyday Americans, an understanding that justice isn't simply abstract legal theory, it affects people's daily lives, and a spirit of decency, modesty, and even-handedness in his work. Judge Garland is admired for his courtesy, his devotion to family, and his civic-mindedness. For the past 18 years, he served as a tutor for young students at a local D.C. elementary school. During my time as president, through 3 separate Supreme Court appointments, in conversations with Republicans and Democrats alike, one name came up more than any other: Merrick Garland. I understand that we're in the middle of an especially noisy and volatile political season, but at a time when our politics are so polarized, when norms and customs of our political rhetoric seem to be corroding, this is precisely the time we should treat the appointment of a Supreme Court justice with the seriousness it deserves.
The United States Stars and Stripes are featured in several parts of Havana as Cubans prepare for the historic visit of U.S. President Barack Obama. U.S. flags, phrases in English, and the images of Obama adorn clothing, buildings, and streets throughout the city. He arrives in Havana on Sunday for his visit that seals the rapprochement he and Cuban President Raul Castro agreed in December 2014 after 18 months of secret negotiations. Since then, Havana has changed noticeably. The number of U.S. visitors soared 77% in 2015, swarming hotels and restaurants that have been booked to capacity. Obama this week issued sweeping regulations to promote even more U.S. travel and trade to Cuba. It was the 5th time he has used executive powers to boost ties with Cuba, sidestepping the Republican-controlled Congress, which has refused to lift a 54-year-old economic embargo against the island. The changes have imbued many Cuban artists with a desire to reflect the shift in their work. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. The waste management plan begins with the first waste trucks entering the Nami landfill that has been closed now for 8 months. Prime Minister Salam justifies Arab countries' concerns about a possible Iranian advancement in the region, describing attempts to challenge it as legal. 4 people killed in a suicide bombing in Turkey's capital, Istanbul. 36 people gravely wounded. Thank you for watching Future Television. We'll catch us again tomorrow for all the latest. Have a good night.
بقول له يا سيد أنا رجعت على لبنان، أتمنى إنك ترجع كمان على لبنان.
قرار صادر من مجلس الجامعة تسمية حزب الله الإرهابي.